think in the early stages, it's not about AI. AI in itself is not a strategy.
Welcome to The Array by Jacquard, the agentic enterprise platform that creates content that converts. On today's episode, we're thrilled to welcome Victoria Lozano, former Chief Marketing Officer at Crayola. During her time at Crayola, she led global brand marketing, education, digital content partnerships, and experiential businesses while overseeing new revenue platforms with full P&L responsibility. She helped evolve Crayola from the traditional arts and crafts company into a broader creativity platform, expanding into new business models while building organizational capabilities that needed to support long-term growth. Before we get over to Vicky, Jasper, how have you been?
I'm good. You may hear some pretty vicious thunder in the next half an hour. There's a thunderstorm that's just rolled in where I am, and it's gotten very dark all of a sudden. There's been a couple of claps that's kind of made me jump. So just pre-warning you of that. But yeah, I'm good. I'm at my in-laws' house in the north of Italy. I had to escape London to get some air conditioning, to be honest, because it's been pretty hot in London recently, and the distinct lack of air conditioning adoption in the UK at the moment is something that's going to have to change if this global warming thing keeps happening.
I've heard, if you can't tell, the wooden skis behind me might point that I'm not actually in South Carolina. I'm in upstate New York this time as well, also to escape a bit of the heat. So we're both escaping the heat, and I'll be down in the city seeing some of our partners later this week, which will be good fun. But yeah, we've actually had some pretty crazy stuff. It's what is it? El Nino? Is that the thing that's making all these storms? You know about that?
Yeah, there's El Nino and then La Nina. They sort of flip.
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently,
I never know which cycle we're in, but
the UK now needs to just commit to air conditioning as a result, which many years. But
my prediction for the future is that Cornwall will soon be the Caribbean location of the world.
It's funny that I think Brits would rather just go on holiday than get air conditioning. I think that's they'd rather just get on a plane than actually just get an AC. Yeah, great. All right, let's get into it. Throughout her career, Victoria has consistently sat at the intersection of strategy, creativity, and commercial execution. So in today's conversation, we'll explore how organizations can prioritize AI investments to drive growth, how marketing can lead enterprise transformation, and why the future belongs to teams that hire for human judgment and taste, not just task execution. Welcome, Vicky.
Great to be here. Thanks, Toby and Jasper.
Now, it's a bit of a traditional on this podcast where we ask the guests some interesting, some questions about some insights we have from our data set. So we have a data set of millions, I think even billions of data points from millions of campaigns that have been sent through Jacquard. And they're all email subject lines, push notifications, SMSs, things like that. And then it's a model that's trained off all the opens and clicks and things like that. And so I'm going to ask some questions, and I've put some questions all kind of related to Crayola and color. And I'm going to ask some questions about what colors you guys think generates more engagement and which colors generate less engagement. So there are right and wrong answers to this, but there's no way anybody could really know. So I'm going to start off by saying, what do you think? And we'll get Jasper to answer first. So you have a bit of something to Jasper doesn't know any of the answers to this, but at least you can at least you get a shot based on knowing another guess. If a piece of content has this color in it, it has the highest engagement rate relative to other colors. What color do you think that is?
I know where I want to go with this. Well, actually, I guess there's a bit of a philosophical question because black isn't really a color, is it? Black is all colors
black
together.
Assume it's a color for the purpose of this exercise.
Okay, yeah, because there's a philosophical thing
there. And I want to be clear, I'd excluded purposefully anything that mentioned Black Friday.
Oh, that's exactly where I was going with it. Okay, so there is a color in here that increases engagement.
It's when it's mentioned, there's a higher engagement rate than the other colors. This is just the messages that mention colors. So it's not comparing it against.
It's not referencing Black Friday. Black Friday's been excluded.
Anything that does mention black is included. Just if it's followed by Friday, I've excluded it.
I'm going to go with blue.
Okay, interesting.
Do I need to say by how much?
I was going to say blue too.
You were going to say blue? Do I need to say by how much? Sometimes I have to say by...
The way this is done, it is how often does it beat other colors.
Okay.
So it's a harder thing to say than an actual like open rate or anything.
I'll just stick with blue then.
Stick with blue. Vicky, you're going to have to pick a different one. I'd recommend picking a different one.
Okay,
That means I'm wrong.
I am
Well, there are colors
to,
worse than blue, but not many.
I'm going to go with red.
Red. Okay. So the answer to that
I'm sure
is,
you're both wrong.
well, you're not right. Red is better than blue, though. I will say
Okay.
that. So that's
I'll
good.
take it.
You beat me.
Red
That's
is
the litmus test.
Red is the 9th. No, actually, those two aren't colors, I suppose. So it's technically the 7th. Red is the 7th most popular color. And then blue is the 9th most popular color.
Out
So
of
you've got-
9?
Out of, I've got 13 colors here.
Oh, okay. I'm not dead last. I'm just close to.
There's two. I would say white and silver are worse than blue, Jasper.
So what is number
Interesting.
one?
Number one is yellow.
Oh,
Yellow
that was my
beats
second
out
guess.
every other color quite significantly. Now, what's interesting, what do you think? And this tells you how much marketers really know about what works and what doesn't work. What is the most, other than Black Friday, what is the most common color used in marketing content?
Yellow.
No.
Black.
I mean, I gave you a hint basically saying that marketers don't know. If marketers knew, they would use yellow. Yellow is the most performant. What is the most common? Red.
I still go with black.
Red is the answer. Red is
Okay.
black, including Black Friday.
That's like the first one I've got right ever.
Yeah, black is like by far the best, including Black Friday. But out of, I think this used a sample of actually for this number, because it had to count a lot, of a sample of about 1,000 color references. Red was mentioned 251 times.
So this is like creating urgency, like things are running out.
There's a passion, I think, associated with red, maybe even anger with red. I think there's, you can do all that kind of psychological stuff and what colors mean. But red is mentioned number one, then it's blue, then it's green. Yellow was used 11 times out of 1,000, whereas red was 251, blue was 216, and green was 143. So there you go. Yellow that's people need to start talking about yellow a bit more.
A little bit of an interesting tidbit is yellow is by far the most visible color out there. The human eye actually notices it the most, which is why school buses are yellow. So maybe those answers have something to do with that.
That's a great point. It's also quite gender neutral, I think. So it has quite a broad, there's interestingly, I've got here pink and purple, and obviously blue. There's an element of maybe a gendered nature to that I think maybe
there's a happiness around it too, but it tends to not be people's favorite color. But I guess based on that criteria, it sort of in hindsight makes sense.
Yeah. I just always know that on those psychological tests, like how I'm like a yellow and a green. Like that you do those tests. I always come in at yellow.
Oh, the aura thing.
Yeah.
I think we did
the
it.
aura.
I think Summit. My aura was just pure red.
Mine was like all colors.
Yeah. Interestingly, and the last thing I'll say about this before we get into the main questions, but gold is 6, and I would have thought, just thinking about marketing and loyalty and gold members and all this kind of stuff, that gold would be higher than number 6. It also was mentioned 94 times out of the 1,000 campaign samples. So it's interesting. And actually gray beats gold in performance, which I thought was, because I also wouldn't associate gray with any kind of, but I suppose it depends what you could say. Could be like something like a weather thing, gray clouds, and talking about retailing, maybe. And
I think all of that just kind of clearly points to that color is a rather personal choice, right? And personal preference. 100%. So
100%.
There you go.
Yeah.
Actually, the last little insight, I won't ask a question about this. Mentioning color improves performance far more than mentioning any one color. So the word color is a really high performant message. Talking about the concept of color, like we have these new colors in stock, or it could be, is a big driver, but actually mentioning color itself is worse than baseline. So perhaps to your point, Vicky, and maybe this sample, I guess, is a relatively historically unpersonalized sample, that it's almost narrowing, tending to a broader range of customers with an individual color is almost it's putting on it. It's I don't know what the word is, but it's almost enforcing a choice rather than talking about colors more broadly. But I thought that was an interesting insight.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I think color is just such a personal choice, and it's also a rather emotional choice. If I asked you about your favorite color, a lot of times it causes kind of a reaction, how that color, makes you feel and whatnot. And I think once you pick a color, then it becomes narrower and more self-selecting. But the notion of color, I think, is quite emotional in a lot of ways.
And people want to have choice.
Yeah.
People want to feel like there's choice rather than feel like they're being sort of pigeonholed into one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
All right, Jasper, you want to
let's get into it with the serious questions. Vicky, really great. Thank you for joining the podcast today. Where are you dialing in from?
I'm actually based out of Eastern Pennsylvania, just a little bit of outside between New York and Philadelphia.
Oh, nice. I was in Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago for a very, very brief stop literally at Pittsburgh Airport. I hardly left the campus, so that was kind of fun.
Well, that's about as far from me as you could get in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's literally completely at the opposite end, isn't it? Yeah,
yes.
yeah. No, I've only been to that end a couple of times. I've never been to the other end, so it's definitely on the list. But yeah, let's get into it. You've had an incredible career building brands, businesses, and entirely new growth platforms. Looking back, what first attracted you to marketing? And when did you realize you wanted to lead transformation rather than just campaigns?
I always knew I wanted to do marketing. And I got exposed to brand management specifically very early in my career, and I fell in love. I love the notion of being able to define what the brand stands for, to elevate the brand or portfolio of brands, and then use that to drive measurable commercial growth. And that's what I really have done throughout my career and what I'm really passionate and good at. And I think, to me, using that to not just kind of manage the day-to-day and make it a little bit better, but using that to drive transformation, using that to drive the core business, to get into new categories of demos, to create new revenue streams, kind of like to build rather than to manage, is really what I find really inspirational and exciting, and what I that's the energy that I thrive on.
It's almost like creating like a flywheel is the way you're kind of describing it to me. Is brand building is kind of telling a story, but when you're feeding it back into the flywheel that creates the business so that you can start to lead transformation projects, is that how you kind of think about it? Is like, how can we take the storytelling that we're building it and then feed it back into, new pathways that we can take the business in and take it to the customer base? Is that kind of how you approach it?
I think that's absolutely right. I think, to me, really knowing what your brand or your portfolio of brands stands for, what they represent, what the core true insight on how they fit into consumers' lives is really foundational, not just as a marketing and, brand building work, but really as a decision framework for everything that you do across the business. If you have a really clear vision and strategy around that, you can create better go-to-market plans. You can create stronger thought leadership platforms. For example, when you work with your retailers, you could figure out new business opportunities and ultimately create new revenue streams. And I think my work at Crayola is a perfect example of that. The brand kind of evolved from being an arts and crafts brand for young kids to really a champion of creativity, in creativity as essential in life. And when you are a creativity brand, not just an arts and crafts brand, that allows you to then create that thought leadership on how the brand shows off on the core business. It allows you to potentially get into new aisles and new categories and new demographics, and create new revenue platforms like location-based entertainment, like interactive and gaming, which is exactly the work that I led. And I think it is all grounded in the brand and using that as a decision framework to really look at a broader ecosystem of growth possibilities.
Do you think this sort of feeds into also how enterprises and large brands adopt AI as AI is becoming more prevalent in what we do? From what I'm seeing is so many businesses are kind of treating it as this sort of collection of disconnected use cases. And a lot of businesses, there's a lot of talk at the moment about the fact that businesses are actually struggling to extract the value from it. So you've yourself argued it should be instead viewed as like an organizational transformation. So it's part of this story of what you were describing before. What do you think distinguishes companies that are really transforming from those that are simply just adding it on as a tool on top of what they're already doing?
I think the difference there is whether AI really changes how organization drives growth. So it's not just about how quickly someone completes the task, or not how many fewer people you could have to do the work that you need to do. I think companies that are really transforming or using AI as a transformational tools really start with the business strategy. I think no matter what you do, having a really clear understanding of where your business is, what's the situation, what are the opportunities, what are the issues, and then really defining what needs to be true, what needs to happen, and how AI can be part of that tool. And I think if you focus on it as a growth driver, not just an efficiency play, that I think is number one. And number two is realizing that it does require organizational transformation as well. And and around new capabilities, processes, upskilling of the organization, in changing the ways of working in order to really get the value and use that as a growth tool and not purely as an efficiency play.
One thing you mentioned in the call we had previously was how kind of marketing can kind of lead that. Well, marketing is kind of uniquely positioned to lead that transformation. Why is that marketing is, in your eyes, is the catalyst for it?
I will say that I completely agree in that one. I just want to actually kind of double underline that, as I do think it's not just a marketing thing, right? I think it's a broader organizational thing, but not just independently within each department, but as a bigger kind of a business strategy. Because I think what marketing is uniquely able to do is have that broad view of both what people want and also how business can create value from it. And I think, and I've always believed, that good marketers have to do two things. They have to build the brand and they have to drive the revenue. And when you can combine those things is where you, as a marketer, could help shape the entire growth ecosystem. So whether it's the consumer insight or the portfolio strategy or the innovation, the new business lines that I had talked about, or the customer and retail partnerships, commercial executions, all of those things should be centered and coming from that notion of the entire growth ecosystem. Marketing, don't get me wrong, marketing could not do it alone. I think it's really important to have that cross-functional partnership, but I think marketing can help frame up those opportunities and then work together and bring in, whether it's sales, operations, finance, to really be able to implement that transformation in a way that is measurable and concrete.
If you're just at the beginning of the journey, like really like early days, what do you prioritize first? Where do you start?
I think for me, the answer is always based in this notion of having a robust and clear business plan. I think, as I mentioned before, we have a clear assessment of your situation, the factors that might be limiting your growth, or the opportunity that the organization is best or needs to be most urgently needs to pursue. I think that's what then defines how AI can fit to help make those possibilities viable. Whether it's strengthening insight or accelerating innovation or improving execution, what that answer is going to depend on that robust strategy. But I think using AI as one of the tools to help improve the operating model and to advance your capabilities to get there, that's where I think the real possibility is. So I actually think in the early stages, it's not about AI. AI in itself is not a strategy. You have to have a really clear insight in the business strategy, and then use AI to really figure out how to deliver that question of what has to be true for us to deliver on the growth thesis that we have identified.
Yeah, absolutely. So people focus on the solution, but I feel like with AI, because it's such an exciting thing that the change that we're going through at the moment, we've always kind of talked about this is people are starting to focus on the solution rather than the problem that they're necessarily trying to solve. There's a lot of large businesses, and maybe you've come across this yourself, where there's sort of mandates to just use AI, but then they're not really tied to any specific outcomes, and there's almost like a disconnect between the people who are at the coalface kind of executing and those who are at the top kind of making these decisions. But in terms of like your sort of experience and focusing more on the problem itself. So a lot of the brands you've worked for, there's this sort of tension between dealing with consistency at a global level, but then also making the brand relevant to local markets. How do you think about solving that problem? And do you think solutions like AI are a good way of solving that? Or are there other ways that you can figure out how to solve that problem and manage that consistency?
I think AI is, there's obviously a lot of use for AI, but I think from a marketing kind of portfolio strategy perspective, there are several areas where AI is especially invaluable in terms of advancing the capabilities, the organization capabilities and results. And I actually think brand governance is one of those areas. Not the only one, but is definitely one of those. And I think the ability to not only kind of make the full body of brand knowledge consistent and brought together, right? So whether it's the strategy, the identity, the claims, the evidence, the actual product information or the assets, all of that, making that really accessible and usable across the organization, especially in large global matrixed organization, it's usually the case where the information exists. But where it exists and who has access to the information and how easily, I think is often a challenge. And I also think that organizations are not always broadly clear on what is sacred and what is sort of changeable, right? And I do think the brand governance tools enable you to really not only make all of this information easily accessible, but also make that clarity really, really visible. And I think that's what enables you to ultimately look at how do you not only protect the brand and be consistent with the brand and those things that really are sacred and should never change, while still giving the local teams, based on real true insights, the ability to modify, to edit, to customize and localize things that they need in order to be able to more appropriately go after business growth in their own markets. I think that is a very, very powerful tool to be able to accomplish that, specifically with the intent of disseminating, but also bringing back and capturing, right, what's really working and how do you leverage those insights globally and scale it across markets so that you could drive that pace of execution and speed to market that ultimately helps you accelerate business performance results.
Conversation earlier about the colors, how much it'd be fascinating to see actually by local geography, how those answers changes between the colors that people engage with. I'm sure it's fundamentally an American audience,
different.
Yeah. Makes me think about things like, was it Kit Kat in Japan and all the different flavors that Kit Kat have in Japan. I know you've seen that. And then like all the flavors they've got elsewhere. And it's like, there's just fundamentally different flavors or colors that people resonate with.
I think whether it's personal preferences, but there's also a huge part about cultural context, right? And I think between those two things, a lot of not just colors, but the insights and the way that people relate to messaging, the way that they spark to marketing ideas and executions, I think could vary quite a bit. And I think any time that as a marketer, but as a broader business leader, you could ensure, again, that you are consistent and you're protective of the things that need to be the same across globally, but you give markets that flexibility, that's when you can drive, I think, much better performance and growth, and importantly, speed to market, so you can learn and test and be able to implement the things that are really impacting your business in a positive way.
It kind of actually goes quite nicely into this next question. How do you think AI changes the way marketers move from kind of reporting on customer behavior to actually kind of anticipating what customers want next? Is there a different way of insight and foresight that you think about as it relates to AI? Does it change? Is it kind of more of the same as you were saying earlier? It's about having a strategy, not just about AI, or does AI really change what that strategy is?
I mentioned, I think there are several areas, and brand governance was one of them, but this insight and foresight is, I think, another one. I think AI can absolutely synthesize search, social, reviews, retailer data, customer feedback, research. And I think one of the most important things it can do, it's sort of shorten the distance between signal and strategy, right? So whether it's the input, how do you digest it, but then also obviously map out and identify potential need spaces, develop concepts, test those concepts. The kind of AI-enabled research, even qualitative, is not only fast, less expensive, but the quality of insight is incredibly rich and allows you to act on it, not only in a more, I think, ultimately productive way, but in a faster way. So I think both in terms of getting the signal, but then also shortening the distance for you to be able to respond to that signal and bring and capture opportunities in market, whether it's product innovation, whether it's activation ideas, whether it's, again, new revenue platforms. I think that is a huge advantage and a huge benefit of AI that marketing teams should absolutely lean into. And whether it involves building internal kind of platforms to be able to capture it, whether it's working with external partners that enable you to scale it up and do this quickly, how is sort of dependent on the individual organization and the internal capabilities. But I think the what is incredibly rich.
Jacquard's a very different business to Crayola, but I think those are points are still very true. I mean, we have been looking at when a prospect or a customer mentions a bit of product feedback, that is a signal that's captured by AI and then passed to the right person on the product team to kind of get that insight. I like your perspective. It shortens the distance. Before that insight existed, but it wasn't either in the right place and it didn't get to the right place quick enough. I think I agree. It doesn't matter. The how in your business is completely different, but the fact that it's true is still quite.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I also think, especially if you're in a large, global, complex organization, it's very easy to get caught in the trap of being data rich but insight poor. Right. And I think there's just the ability to get those nuggets that are really specific and actionable and validate them quickly, I think really unleashes a lot of potential to capture those growth opportunities while they're still available.
If you had one piece of advice to people who are aspiring to be CMOs or at a point in their career where maybe they're looking at it as the next step, and they're preparing their organizations for an AI-driven future, how would you advise them? What would be your one sort of nugget of advice that you give them?
My advice would be, don't start with AI, start with the business. Be really clear on what your growth thesis is. Where do you think the growth can come from? What's preventing you from actually capturing it today? And importantly, what needs to be true for you to get there? I think that's when AI becomes helpful to be able to determine where it can improve, how it could help. And it should really not be treated as a separate agenda. I think it's a way for you to deliver and become part of an operating model that allows you to deliver the kind of growth that you believe your business is capable of or aspires to. That would be my biggest advice in terms of how to think about AI.
Victoria Lozano is the former Chief Marketing Officer at Crayola.